Mine. Okay, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
So I have mixed feelings about today's topic, and but you're going to straighten me out as you all do. In fact, on one case, you're going to have to talk me down. But before we get to the U.S. Supreme Court decisions, which is the topic of the day, I have one or two. Well, there's just two oddball things. No, actually, I only have one oddball thing and two other remarkable things. So, if listeners haven't subscribed to SCOTUS blog or look at SCOTUS blog once in a while, they just really should. So, I spent a little time looking through it today, and oh my God, the wealth of common sense, understandable, readable thing. You don't have to be a lawyer to go, oh, well, wait, a lot of what I read in the press is, and a lot of my own opinions may not be quite right. I should kind of look at SCOTUS blog once in a while to kind of understand one branch of government. Agree or disagree?
Totally agree. It's an incredible resource. It's one of those things that you almost can't believe it exists. It's so good. And it's
Yeah.
and everything good is available and out there. It's fantastic. And the quality
Well,
of the scholarship is incredible too. The people who
and
contribute there are amazing.
and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just looked at the public view, but at least what I was looking at was free. Is it a subscription
Yeah.
thing?
Well, it was going under, I guess, and then the Dispatch came in and rescued it. So now it's part of the Dispatch.
Oh,
So
maybe yeah, maybe. So is it free for everybody, or do you have
yeah,
to
yeah, it's
subscribe?
free. Those resources are free, but it is supported by
All
the
right.
people who subscribe to the Dispatch.
Well, it's completely incredible. So I just urge every viewer of ours, and I'll post about it separately because it makes you smarter than reading a newspaper article or even talking with your friends. It makes
Oh,
you smarter.
yep,
Okay.
absolutely agree.
Okay.
And they also link to a lot of the people I mean, almost every prominent legal scholar, I shouldn't say every, but many prominent legal scholars contribute to um, the SCOTUS blog. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Okay. Well, we've done our public service
yep.
announcement today to encourage people to be smarter on the U.S. Supreme Court. Switching gears slightly, I should have started with something like this first. Before we get to the Supreme Court, you said in a Facebook post yesterday, I think it was, that, hey, there's good news and bad news. And you were talking about Cato. And so I looked at it. Okay, I wonder what the good news and bad news is. I saw mostly bad news. Now, what's the good news? You didn't explain it.
The good news is that there are still some people who remember what the Declaration of Independence is for or what the Fourth of July is.
That's good
Um,
news. What percentage?
the
Yeah,
bad
off the
news
top of
is that a lot of people don't, especially young people.
I know, but it's like it's almost dreadful.
It's almost two-thirds of young people don't know.
Right. Well, but that's not good news, Professor, that some people
Yeah,
don't understand America.
but I mean, I also feel like every week we say this, and I think I was doing this. I looked this up for one of my lectures that I was preparing, and what's people think that what we need, and I'm not disagreeing that what we need this is civics education, but it's much much more than civics education because when all if all you do is engage in civics education, then all of the things that you're learning lack a context. So what's really missing is we can engage in all the civics education we want, but it's not going to put the American experience into its proper context without the study of Western Civ and world history. It's not just civics education that's missing. It's civics education and Western Civ and world history because I was every now and then I do these comparative things, and I looked up, and this is gonna just to be, gosh, this will get me canceled and fired, and I don't know if I should say this out loud, but I wanted to know how many Native Americans died in military conflicts with the United States. That how many deaths in all battles, all wars, between violence created by state and local governments directed at Native Americans in the entire history of the United States. and it's
And that
roughly the same.
excludes individual adventurers and farmers and
Yeah,
fight.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So it excludes, uh, yeah. But I just wanted to know uh, every single massacre perpetuated by the United States Army or by a state militia, all of it. And I wanted the highest possible number. And it's about the same number of people who the Japanese killed in the Bataan Death March.
Can't be
And
that little.
yeah, it is. But the reason I'm pointing this out is that we lack perspective on where the history of the United States sits in a broader historical context. So, um, for instance, you know, in any given year, Russia or Japan or um, Germany,
Iran.
you know,
Iran.
or I mean, you could just look at like what Russia did in some given year in the late 19th century in what is now Ukraine, and you would find atrocities greater than all combined atrocities in American history. And it's just because you don't, it's in a way we're so dulled to the scale of what was going on in the outside world, we lose sight of just how unique the United States is.
Well, so
Um,
Professor, so you don't lose your tenure or whatever you said would be get attacked or whatever. There's got to be somebody else who's written about this. There's got to be like
yeah,
a paper on it.
yeah. I mean,
Well,
I hopefully was doing real historical research, and but I'm like compiling from a
well,
million
but is there
different
a number
sources.
that I don't want to pin you down and get you in trouble? But is there
It was
some? Give
about
me some.
50 to 65,000.
Okay, so a lot. I mean, it's not to be minimized, but you're saying by comparison of what other countries have done to their own citizens or enemies, it's just not well, not nothing, but it's not significant compared to.
Well, and also, I mean, one march compared to from 1607 to the present.
Yeah.
You know that we encounter this stuff all the time where we're trying to come up with a sort of moral equivalence, and people will say, "Oh, well, yeah, what they did was bad, but look at what we did." And and also sometimes what we lose sight of, and this will maybe transition into the Supreme Court decisions. But I was also thinking about how we forget that this push and pull and bad action and good action is often at the behest of some group of people who want their government to do something. And and to come back to one of our big themes for um, this show is that our system of government, if we're going into our 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence doesn't say that Americans are not human, and it doesn't say that Americans are perfect. It says we think that human beings are capable of living in peace with one another, but they have to have their rights protected. And protecting these rights means protecting, inalienable rights, your right to be left alone, but also consent of the governed, which means your right to get together with other people and do stuff. And those things are not always going to produce perfection. It's going to produce something that limits how human beings can harm one another. That our system of government is a harm limiting exercise. Um, it is, and people act like, well, that's not good enough. And you just have to say that in the last 250 years, it has produced astounding results. I was thinking about this because, again, in the news, all these socialist candidates, and one of them came out and said, we're going to create a society that, doesn't have murders. But if you look at the history of murders in the United States, what you will see is we are slowly creating a society that doesn't murder. And what I find strange is that people want to step in and say, okay, we need to stop this. This isn't working. And you're like, really? Because I'm looking at this chart for 250 years that's showing that what we are doing in the United States, with some ups and downs, is we are becoming a more peaceful society. We are becoming every year a little bit better at being this thing that you say you want, but you want to destroy the United States because we're not doing it fast enough. And I would just simply point out, like, I don't know, slavery existed for thousands of years, and it took us, 80 something, 80. And murder has existed for thousands of years, and we're getting better at it. And oh my gosh, we're becoming an incredibly safe society. Um, uh, and and the only way somebody could come along and make the argument that our system is bad or that it doesn't work or that it is to take the history of the United States completely out of context. So, when I see that thing in the Cato Institute, what the bad news is really bad. The more ignorant people are, the more gullible they are. The more they will fall for someone who who gives them a few facts out of context. And so my solution is that we need not just civics education, but we need education in Western civilization, um, world history. We need education in literature. We need education in philosophy. It is the degradation of all of the liberal arts that is robbing us uh, of the context to see the progress that has taken place over the last 250 years.
So, Professor, I'd like to give you a reaction to that. As you know, it wouldn't surprise you that I was not much of a history student in junior high school, college, law school. Even law school, I wasn't a great appreciation of history. Facts kind of bore me, or names and dates and facts.
Well, that's not what history is.
But that's what I was taught. You sit there and you
Yeah.
have to memorize some date and some battle and and it didn't give me anything to hang on to that affected my life. It wasn't until I'll tell Ken Burns or maybe Roots, watching Roots on TV. And you're probably too young to know about Roots.
I'm
Um,
not too young to know about it. I'm a historian, but
yeah,
I'm
but you didn't watch
too
it though.
young to have watched it live
Yeah,
as,
yeah.
as
But that was storytelling, and okay, that makes sense to me. And so now, gosh, in my 50s, now 60s, I love history, but it takes the tour of Gettysburg to actually see it and walk it and talk to people that know what they're, professional historians that really know what they're talking about. And then you're kind of walk around and see it from the other angle to try to see what the other general and the colonel was thinking about. Oh, that's really kind of interesting. I mean, and then it becomes fascinating when you put personality and their background to it. So what I'm hearing you, and when it somehow makes a connection with a person, whether by sight or touch or storytelling, and then I'm sorry to tell you this, I am not vulnerable. I kind of think we have done a lot of horrible things to American Indians. So when you're telling this story, this is new to me. I'm
well, I'm not
listening.
telling you that we haven't.
Right,
But the
right, right.
story is just
But I'm
different
just
than,
thinking like, no, America's always been really bad compared to concerning American Indians. I have that stereotype of that's a failure of our country.
well,
And you're saying yes,
yes, but here's the other thing.
but yeah.
Native American groups all deserve their own autonomy too. And the thing that people do with Native Americans so often is to conflate them all into being one group of people,
Yep.
and I would just say like this is, it would be like us just saying Europeans, right? And pretending like there's no difference between the Germans and the British during World War II. Like
Right.
there's a big difference between the Creek and the Comanche, like
Yeah.
the Sioux and the Cherokee, it so and every one of those Native American tribes, they deserve their own history. They deserve their own autonomy. They are a different group of people who are entitled to their story just like everybody else. But yes, it becomes very easy to lump them all together and to pretend that it was just, one big story of, good versus bad or something.
Yeah. So your context is really helpful today. I've got one more oddball thing before we start.
Yeah.
Um, I want you to read these 250 songs. CBS News or Good Morning, or well, I think it's Good Morning America. No, I'm not sure what. CBS in the morning news did 250 years, 250 songs. The best of America songs, the best 250
Wow.
songs of 250 years. And I'd like you to review that list, and we'll talk about it in a future. One of them that stood out to me was uh, Good Morning America. Yeah, the city of New Orleans. Um, Arlo Guthrie made it really famous, but everybody else did the cover too. I'm telling you, I memorized that song in middle school, and then I wrote an essay, What Freedom Means to Me, and it's a weird connection. I'd like to have your review of those 250 songs and see what they've missed, see what you like, see what their prejudices were or their biases. And of
Yeah.
course, you'll like that. So I think you'll like this exercise. So if you'll do
Well,
that
I'm
for me.
breaking our rule that I will do no preparation for this show.
Yeah, but this is something
But
you
this is
love.
something if I had known about it, I would have done it anyway.
Yeah, you love
I can't,
songs and you
yeah, I
love
can't resist
history,
that.
and you'll probably critique the 7 reviewers that came up with this list. But anyway, I really would appreciate that.
We could
Okay, let's get
also,
to the.
who else might want in on that is we might want to see if we can rope in Professor Katzum. Uh,
Is he a big song guy?
oh, big time. Yeah,
Okay, well, why don't we
he's
do a whole show on that? Well, we'll review it first, and then we'll talk
yeah.
about, because I think it gets back to your point. If I have a different feeling of America and the South, by the way, just because of those kind of songs. I kind of thought we were all America and the Civil War and these still battles that we kind of fight over slavery or new slavery, or it's a weird. Some of the stuff you've taught me over the last 5 years, I've I never had. I kind of thought we were all America, and so naivety, but it's because of a cool song, "The City of New Orleans." Anyway,
Well,
review
as
that.
a transition, I mean, almost all the biggest of the Supreme Court cases sort of pivoted on almost all legal questions that were brought out by the Civil War, and the legal distinctions made by jurists in the 19th century that
You're going to have to
had to
talk
be
me down. You want to
undone.
go right into that?
Well, I don't know if it's what
No, you got to talk me down.
okay.
Here, all
Well,
right, let's go to it. Trump v. Barbera. Professor, I am a strict interpretation guy of the Bible. I know we Bible. Well, no, I'm not of the Bible, but I am of the Constitution. I'm a strict constructionalist, and so I am very disappointed. I'm wondering if my whole worldview is wrong on Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. I'm very concerned that they don't have a just straight reading of the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. It says what it says, and they're saying it doesn't say what it says. And that 5-1-3 decision, you have previously said, it should be 9-0. This is no big deal. I'm looking at it going danger signs, danger, danger, danger. I know it was 5-1-6-3, but I'm telling you, I think it's really, I think it's a 5-4 decision. Um,
no,
so,
yeah, I
talk me
strongly.
down.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no,
talk me down.
I strongly disagree with that. First, I would say um, the the um, the decision and the dissents are closer together than I think most people would realize.
Keep talking. Talk me down.
That that even though the opinion of the court, written by Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, is really well written. It's well reasoned. A normal person could read it. My first thought, actually, when I was reading it, is like, I can't believe, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and it is amazing that we have this institution, the Supreme Court, where the smart people write in plain language, and they're not trying to hide what their arguments are. They want to be understood, and the dissents and the
Okay,
dissent.
I concur. I think Chief Justice Roberts' majority opinion that five, superb. I'm proud to be an American. Great decision. Good job. And now you're saying the
But I'm also saying that it's also wonderful that in the dissents they're not trying to hide what they believe. They want to be understood. They're making legal arguments. They're making them peacefully and abiding by the
oh,
decision one way or the
okay,
other.
that's true, but they're also going to the heart of it, what the Declaration of Independence means, Professor, and they're
Yeah,
arguing against what it means to be an American.
but here's my point. I disagree, I disagree with the parts of the majority opinion because in some ways I don't think it goes far enough. Because in my view, the Constitution, as it was originally ratified, was a freedom document, and that the natural state of a human being is free. And
You're arguing Douglas and Lincoln,
yeah, not just Douglas and Lincoln, though. I would say I'm also arguing
founders.
Washington and Hamilton and Madison, uh, and Gouverneur Morris and Roger Williams and I don't know, throw
Yeah.
in if anybody else you want. Um, Roger Sherman, all the Rogers. The but that it doesn't go far enough in recognizing that even though almost the entire thing hinges on this history of the Dred Scott decision, it doesn't go far enough in understanding just how bad that Dred Scott decision was. That and really, I looked for this, and there was no mention of the Amistad case, which I also thought was kind of interesting because the Amistad
Remind
case,
me, that
well,
doesn't ring a
Amistad case was, you know, there were some enslaved people who had been captured in Africa, brought to the West Indies, and
bell.
then the Spanish would do this thing where they would hide the fact that they were from Africa by moving them from port to port, and then
Yeah,
pretending that they were from there. Anyway,
yeah,
a group of these enslaved peoples, they overthrew the crew,
yeah.
and then they were drifting at sea, end up in the United States. What is the status of a human being who happens to find themselves in the United States? And I would have thought it was an important enough point to establish, like, what is the natural state of a human being who just happens to find themselves within the borders of the United States? And I thought that it was, so I was kind of surprised that this wasn't foundational to either the opinion or the dissents.
That's a
Because to
great
me,
point, worthy of thinking through. That's
to me,
awesome.
it would be important to say, all right, well, what did the Supreme Court find? What was the natural state of a human being who literally drifted onto our shores? Establish that first and then build upon it. Because they said the natural status of a human being who's here is that person is free. uh, but the second bit
All
is
are
like,
created equal. Goes right to the Declaration.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That is a human being, and a free human being. But the next question was, all right, now who is a citizen? And again, I wouldn't be quite as upset at the dissenters maybe as you are.
Well, I'm only
Because
upset at Kavanaugh and Gorsuch because they're better than that.
you're not upset at Alito because I'm
Yeah,
about to
Alito
praise
and Thomas,
to
they've got
praise
their
something
well-rooted
that was in
agendas.
the Alito dissent that I think is a really important point, which is that you know the the decision itself tries to go back to English common law, and Alito kind of alone points out that in one really important regard, the American Revolution was a break with the past. That there were no British citizens, there were British subjects.
Subjects. Yeah.
So, as to the subject, as to this question of what citizenship is, it might be one of those things where you can't go back to the feudal past. Anyway, I felt like that was an important point to make. It's
Concur.
not
That's
an
great.
irrelevant point,
Yeah,
you know.
agreed.
The and and the the Thomas uh, dissent and the and Gorsuch, all three of them, and even the Kavanaugh concurrence.
Well, Kavanaugh's the worst.
I, I don't
That,
know
you're
his
not
point.
even deciding on the Constitution. You're just saying it's by statute and the
Well, he's
Constitution.
just saying that there's more wiggle room in this than you might think, and thus tie goes to the statute. But in many ways, like within those dissents, was all each once I got into the dissents a little bit, I felt like each one of them contained a little mini concurrence because every one of them was open to the fact that what Trump did was illegal or unconstitutional. Uh,
You mean what you said? All Kavanaugh and all three dissenters. You think that they might
they
rule
had
differently if
something in there that uh, if they had allowed for the majority opinion to be a little bit different, um, you could have had um, well, it's hard to say because what was I think that, and again, this is pure. What I'm about to say is pure speculation. I think what the chief wanted was a decision that said what Trump did is unconstitutional and illegal. That it was against the Constitution, and I think he wanted that coalition to be um, a mixture of liberals and conservatives.
so. Professor, you
And
2 months
but
ago.
in doing so, it meant that you essentially had three conservatives who said, "Well, we don't need to go that far in overturning the Trump executive order. We would have overturned it on a narrower ground."
Okay, Professor, this isn't Crossfire, and we also don't have I can't pull the tape and show you what you said a couple months ago, but my memory was you said there's a good chance that the Chief Justice is going to try to fashion this where it's a 9-0 opinion. In
I'm
fact,
sure he
when
did.
I said this was such an important decision, then you go, no, it's actually not. This is a pretty no-brainer. This should be an easy 9-0 or 7-2 decision. And I don't think I'm hearing you. You're making a persuasive argument for whatever reason you're trying to be persuasive. I'm telling you, I see danger signs all over this. I see Trump and what he said. I saw the Speaker of the House what he said. I see what senators are saying. They think it's it's an absurdity and an atrocity, and we've got to change the Constitution or at least statute to make sure that birthright citizenship is eliminated in America. That's what they're saying on the news today. So I don't mean to mix Supreme Court versus what Congress is saying, but the president and Congress
I
are
think
saying
there are
overrule
probably
the
like
Supreme
10
Court.
people in the Trump administration who feel that way. And I bet there are like, 8 podcasters or something. But this is
The Speaker of the House. It's not
he,
some weirdo. It's not some unknown
he doesn't
person.
mean it. Like, that's a lie. Like, I mean, he's not going to do anything. I mean,
Well,
if
but
you
don't
got
you
him
think that's
drunk, I
dangerous
mean,
for America's soul? Even if that's true, that he's just pandering to his crazy people in the party, it's not good for our system. It's not good for our institutions. It's not good for our soul to want to treat people differently than what our founding ideals were.
well, I just don't know if that's really what, I mean, that's not the only thing that could possibly happen. The only window, if you will, that has any chance of passing would not be anything that touches upon fundamentally who's a citizen in the United States. The the question that probably does get 4 votes on the Supreme Court is just the idea that Congress could probably pass a statute um, making it difficult for like what's sometimes called birth tourism. And in particular, they could probably do something with in relationship to countries that are that have like a Commonwealth status within the United States or a special relationship with the United States. So, for instance, I mean, again, this is incredibly rare, but I guess there are cases where, Guam has a special legal relationship with the United States, but it also has some autonomy that they can make their own agreements with countries like China. And I guess there are certain numbers of people, again, who knows, we've never been able to nail down what I thought was a good or reliable source for this because it's all just activists. But
I've looked as well, and I can't
there
find
does
one.
seem to be some number of people who exploit legal loopholes in order to make their kids um, American citizens. And Congress might be able to pass some kind of a statute that closes those loopholes. And I think right now you'd have 5 votes on the Supreme Court that would say, yeah, they could probably pass some statute and the that's really the heart of the dissent. That
Oh,
only,
you don't think the heart of the dissent is hundreds of thousands of Central and South Americans coming up across the border over the last decade? And that they are not under the legal jurisdiction of the United States because they're clearly illegal. And why would we be granting them birthright citizenship? That's the heart.
I don't think so.
Really?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that might be some of the political motivation behind it, but I didn't see that in the legal opinions of the. So, I mean, I know that's what's pushing that politically, but that's not what the Supreme Court was arguing about.
I assume we're going to live long and prosperous lives and we'll know each other 3 and 5 and 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And so try to bookmark this in our memory, and maybe we'll have the technology where we can bring this part of the tape up. To me, I saw clear tea leaves going, oh, if the Republicans stay in charge and get another Supreme Court appointment or two, birthright citizenship is dead. I looked at that decision, and that's what I think is happening. Now, all the liberal talking points are saying that what I'm saying, I'm not doing it from a liberal talking point. I'm doing it from a conservative historical standpoint that they're actually right.
I think it's important that for the sake of our healthy political system, that there are people who believe that. So and work to make sure it doesn't happen, but it's not something I'm worried about.
Okay. Well,
If anything, I feel like what Roberts did by not going for the 9-0, by going for the 6-3, um, if anything, put it further away. And I think that's why he did it.
I love this. That's why you're a U.S. history professor and I'm me. So I love this conversation. Thank
Well,
you
I mean,
kindly.
I'm stealing ideas from other people.
Of course. Of
So,
course. All right.
I
Do we need to talk anything else about Trump v. Barbera, or can we go to
mean,
five?
I'd be interested if Bart or Jeff have
Okay.
anything or
Yeah. Yeah.
Sand.
Let's do that. Good call. Bart, do you want to jump in and tell us why the professor's wrong and I'm right? Sorry. Uh, Bart.
No, I think you're both right. In your own ways, okay?
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, I can't do the what do you call it, the antagonism,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
modern podcasting. Um, I think Stephen is exactly right. I think the what's interesting to me about this case is the majority opinion is like, what is it, between 20 and 24 pages. Um, Justice Thomas's so-called dissent is like a small book, and that shows me that basically I think the reason there are dissents in that case is because of egos of judges. I very rarely say that, but I think Thomas probably would have wanted to write the majority opinion, but the Chief Justice, number one, that wasn't appropriate because he was in the majority. Number two, I I think the Chief Justice has kind of had enough of Justice Thomas writing majority opinions like the Bruin decision on the Second Amendment that just doesn't work. And they've been backtracking from it now for the last, I don't know how many years. So they were not going to let Justice Thomas do it. They were not going to let Alito do it because Alito is too much of a lightning rod. And I think Gorsuch is just a natural contrarian. He's going to do his own thing under all circumstances, and he just decided to. But I think Stephen is right. I think this issue is going to be debated, and it should be debated in Congress. Congress isn't working right now, and it's probably going to be 10 years before it actually is again. But this is really an issue for Congress.
It in Congress.
What's
Just
that?
read the letters, read the words in the 14th Amendment. There's nothing to debate. I don't why do we want to keep this going? And the Supreme Court has kicked this into the Congress and public debate, and now we're going to be arguing about this for the rest of our lives.
Well, we can try, but no one in Congress is going to say, after this case, in my lifetime, I don't expect this issue to come back in this way again, because it's just not
You
going to
need to
happen.
start talking to some conservatives. All I see is them talking about how we're going to win on this issue. Anyway,
How are they going to win
Well,
on this issue? There's maybe 10% of the population that actually supports ending birthright citizenship.
Yeah, Bart's 100% right.
All right.
And
Let's
I
hear from
heard some
Jeff,
of this.
though.
I mean, I heard some of this conservative commentary just this morning. I was listening to the Law Talk with Epstein and you and Charles C.W. Cook, and they have been discussing how some allegedly conservatives were saying this is going to be like Roe versus Wade, and I agree with them. There's no way. This is nothing like Roe versus Wade. And they gave some really good reasons why. First of all, this is keeping something the same. It's not changing something. Second of all, the religious communities that are divided on this issue. Third, it's not life. Fourth, it's out of sight. This is something that is a distraction and for some and an abstraction for others. Um, the only here's the only thing I would say might happen is that in our current dysfunctional Congress, somebody might sneak something in, some kind of omnibus spending bill or something, in that, Congress passes one bill a year and just puts everything in it so I guess that's always a possibility that something gets snuck in
You
and
have
spended bill.
somebody is called Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, but gosh, I've said
Yeah, but
enough.
this stuff is going to get stripped out. There's no way.
All right.
Because number one, I mean, not just even if Republicans won the House and the Senate, which is highly unlikely, but even if they won, there are 10 to 15 senators and 10 to 15 congressmen who feel strongly enough about this issue that it would kill everything if it wasn't stripped out. So
Okay, we've
you
talked
should be
enough about.
0% worried. Yeah.
We both made our points. Now we have to wait months or years to see who's right.
Yeah.
I do appreciate your thoughts, Professor. I hope you're right. Jeff, did you want to jump in on this real quick?
Yeah, I had two really quick things. One, to follow up on what Bart said. In all the decisions I've read, I don't think I can recall one where the majority opinion focused so much on the dissenting opinion. I mean, there was just pages and pages of where Roberts commented not really on what the government's position was, but but on Thomas's position. And I don't think I've seen that before. So that's part of why we waited so long for the decision. The other one, I guess I'd point out, is that I think criticizing Robert's decision on the basis of, to the extent that he based it on the English practice of deciding who's a, kind of misses the point. I mean, that is as good a test for who's under a government as there is. And the genius of what we've done is said, well, it's not actually the king gets to own you, it's we get to be subject to the government. And so I thought it was exactly right and not subject to criticism. But those were my two thoughts on it. And John, I don't know that you fairly criticized Tootle. I think it was me that said it was going to be 9-0 and that it wasn't a consequential thing because it was so clearly an issue that every justice would agree on, and I was wrong.
Okay, well, I don't mean to criticize Tootle. I mean to compliment you then for your wisdom, although they should have sided with you. Thanks, Jeff. Professor, reaction to Jeff's comments.
Jeff is so right that he's wrong about criticizing himself. Because the point that he just made is actually a really good one that bolsters the fact that he was originally right, which is the reason that the majority opinion, I think, focuses so much on the dissent and not on the government position is because the government position was ridiculous. And that every one of those justices found that the government position was ridiculous. So ignore it and deal with, in the opinion, the reasonable disagreements that one could have surrounding an interpretation of the 14th Amendment. So
okay.
Professor, I think you brought up an excellent point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you should leave it at that. That gave a big enough handhold, two handholds for anybody to listen to this. They go, okay, I better read the decision. I posted a couple days ago that every single American citizen should just read this case. You're making the point that they really should read this case because it's interesting and it's thoughtful and it's nuanced and straightforward. We should read this case to understand America and what it means to be an American. So thank you.
But there's another big summary here, though. I want people to have is that the Trump position was ridiculous.
Love this.
That doesn't mean that the justices on the Supreme Court that was ridiculous, and that even though I disagree with them, Jeff disagrees with them, Bart disagrees with them, you disagree with them, but their position isn't ridiculous. And thus it is worthy of engagement.
You were talking unsuccessfully.
I'm going to take exception to one part of that. Thomas's position that the 14th Amendment was only about black people is wrong, in my opinion, and that's me criticizing a very prominent Supreme Court justice. So I'm not sure I want to be on record doing that, but I think that's ridiculous.
Yes, but I agree. But when Jackson criticized Thomas, that I feel like she went too far. So, I disagree with Thomas, but I also disagree with how she characterized Thomas and how far she went. So I was like, so even though her opinion was on quote unquote the side I agreed with, you don't agree with every line of every Supreme Court decision. You just don't.
Okay.
That's why we have 9 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, gentlemen, this is an excellent discussion. And Professor, I'm impressed that you're holding your own against two very accomplished attorneys. So bravo.
Yeah.
Okay, which case do we want to go to next? I think I know your guess. You said the most important case that expands presidential power. If the Supreme Court allows President Trump to do what he wants to do, this will fundamentally change America. That's a direct quote from 3 weeks ago. I'm not sure that's true, but what case am I talking about, Professor? Or which one would you like to go to?
Dealer's choice. I'll let you go. Come on.
All right. Well, it's presidential power and agency removal. If the president can remove heads of independent agencies, then Congress means nothing, is what you said.
Except for that's not what they found. Again, don't necessarily agree with all of it. Don't necessarily disagree with all of it. But it was an interesting exercise in that they kind of found that, broad strokes, the Federal Reserve is different. And
that's Trump v. Cook.
Yeah, that because of the unique history of the United States, that the founders did accept a Bank of the United States. And as I can't remember if this was French or Isger or somebody on their podcast said, when you've got Hamilton and Madison on your side, Hamilton, Madison, and Washington on your side, then you're holding a pretty good hand. So it's pretty clear that the founders believed that Congress could set up some kind of entity that is only indirectly that is somewhat independent. However, in their ongoing effort to clarify executive authority, they are also limiting, or I'm sorry, they're saying the president does have this authority in other executive departments that are
of independent agencies.
Yeah, independent agencies. So essentially saying that every place has to be accountable to one of the political branches of the United States. That there is no there's no agency that is not accountable to someone. There can't be.
So, Professor, I wish I could pull the tape. I'm suggesting that you've changed your mind based off the Supreme Court's decision, that you had tremendous concerns about unbridled power of the executive a few weeks ago, and for some reason you're not giving me that vibe today. You say, it's okay. It should be, it's an okay decision. Am I reading you wrong?
Well, I said it, kind of whether or not it's
Jeff's. And by the way, Professor, Jeff is saying that was him. I can't believe I'm trying to confuse the two of you. It seems like you're different people. It seems like I would know.
Yeah, but my previous position, I think, has been reaffirmed in that I thought we saw a little bit of Supreme Court telling Congress, do your job, and we're not going to rescue you. If you want,
that's a good point,
to limit executive authority over these agencies, you need to write laws limiting
the law
authorities. Yeah, we're not going to bail you out. And that, with the exception of the Federal Reserve,
that was still only a 5-4 decision, though, Professor, and that's still under litigation. That may change based off the end result of the litigation. So I'm not sure the Federal Reserve is so far off. I mean, they're pulling it closer.
Yeah, but I just have a feeling that it's going to actually, I think it's going to end up being a little bit like, I shouldn't say I think it's going to be, but I could see it playing out a little bit like the 14th Amendment case, where essentially the Trump position nobody thinks is reasonable. But there are reasonable disagreements that one could have about the status of independent agencies within the federal government.
So, Professor, tell me if I'm right on this, and maybe it's a better legal question, but from history, President Trump said, "I am now the most powerful president in U.S. history because of this decision." I concur with him. I think there's a movement towards concentrated power in the until Congress chooses to act. If Congress chooses to act, that's no longer true. But as long as Congress is impotent, yeah, there is more and more power vested in the president of the United States, not only for Trump, but for his future successors. Am I right? Am I wrong? You agree, disagree?
Trump doesn't have any power that, well, he's wrong. I mean, you can't, he's
throughout history. Why was he not the most powerful? Who's more powerful? Who had more power?
FDR in 1933. I mean, I would say he has exactly the same powers that Joe Biden and Barack Obama had. That he has the same powers that George W. Bush had. It's just George W. Bush chose not to exercise them. And the same would be true of, in some ways Clinton, but maybe for different reasons, or Bush, Reagan. I mean, I don't. It's just
okay.
So
you're not worried about these cases, the independent agency cases. They're interesting, but it's not that important.
I mean, it's just such an ignorant thing to say. Franklin Roosevelt could have declared himself to be a dictator in 1933, and then once the war was going on, he had his wartime powers during World War II were unmatched. And the same would be true of Abraham Lincoln's. It just can't be true for those reasons. I mean, President Trump can't just order every American to leave their homes and report somewhere. That's insane. So I don't know. He was wrong.
Okay. And specifically regarding to Trump v. Slaughter, removal of independent agencies.
I don't think it's quite as revolutionary of a decision as I thought it might be.
Okay.
In some ways, it's a much more small C conservative decision than I was expecting.
Would this be accurate?
Is a lot less than what could have been changed.
Would this be accurate to say, and maybe the lawyers need to jump in, but would this be accurate to say, yes, the president can remove heads of independent agencies, but the law that Congress wrote establishing the independence agencies and their powers still is under the control of Congress? The president can't overwrite what the independent agency does. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
I'll leave it to our lawyers, but that sounds pretty accurate to me.
Okay. Any reaction to that, Bart or Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's inaccurate. I think what the set of cases, and that's why I said the Cook case was so important. The set of cases that I've seen and the reports on them have essentially said the president can do what he wants with any independent agency because he holds all executive power. So go back to what you guys were talking about. This is the court telling Congress to do your job. Read those statutes. I don't know how Congress could have been any clearer that he can't fire somebody, not the Cook case, but other independent agencies, other than for certain causes. And the court has supported the Trump administration in firing them for any reason or no reason. So, from my perspective, that's why the Fed case was so important. Because if he could also get rid of Lisa Cook, then there was literally nothing Congress could ever do. There's no language clear enough that Congress could ever place that would overcome the court's view that the executive power resides in the executive branch and Congress can do nothing to impinge that. So at least now we know there is something Congress can do. I just don't think it's that Congress did it. I think it's that the court realized that the Fed is so critically important to the United States that they threw out their originalism views and decided to make a public policy decision. And we can go back to Alito's position in the Barbara case, because he also gave up his originalist views in his dissent. But anyway,
Jeff, you've got blinking red light danger sign going.
It's orange. If they had said, yes, he can fire a Fed governor, yeah, it would be red.
Well,
and for business reasons as much as legal reasons.
It was a 5-4 decision, and it was basically because there was a current ongoing litigation over it. It may change based on the course of that litigation.
Yep.
And that's still not red light. Okay. You guys are just not as melodramatic as I am. Bart, do you have any reaction to Professor Tootle or Jeff's comments?
Hey, sorry, you guys. My camera kept going on and off. These cases came out the way I thought they were going to come out. There's kind of an unwritten tradition when presidential administrations change that a lot of the so-called independent agency board members just resign. They submit their resignation. A few of them stay because the administration goes, "Oh, that's okay, you can stay." But the tradition has been that they go, and the president appoints new ones. That has not been the case with the Federal Reserve Board. So what I find interesting about these decisions is that it exactly kind of cemented the status quo while still pretty much getting rid of that. What was that strange case? I don't know if you guys have if we've talked about it already, but the In Re Humphreys executor case that, I couldn't even figure out what the case meant. But they've kind of completely neutered that. What's that?
You studied that in law school.
Yeah. Oh, I studied it in law school. Did not understand it. I studied it. I'm sure all three of us studied that in law school. But yeah, so I kind of am like, I guess I'm kind of where Jeff and Stephen are with this, where it's kind of like, okay, this will be all right for the time being. I just don't see this as that controversial.
And by the way, I thought some independent agencies kept their folks, like the investigating airplane crashes.
Yes. And there are ones that are statutorily required to have certain numbers of each party, and he has ignored that. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. What else could Congress do if they said you must have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, and he fires all the Democrats and nobody can stop him?
Okay. But I think also there's one of the trends in this Supreme Court is
need to keep thinking through this one.
Yeah, but one of the trends in this Supreme Court is that they are a little bit modest in their assumption that they know everything, and they will often say, "We're going to decide the small part of this and let Trump do his thing and let people sue, and we're going to let some other lower courts weigh in on this." Because we need to have some lower courts and some smart federal judges throwing some brain cells behind this and thinking through all of the implications before we make some giant decision. So this felt a little bit like that too, that they want more lawsuits, more judges. And a lot of this is just being caused by just President Trump trying to do things that no previous president has ever tried to do. So a lot of these things that look like victories for him are really not victories so much as they are, we're not saying yes, we're not saying no. Let's let some more lawsuits.
Yeah, and Professor, I appreciate you bringing that up. In law school, they taught us that that's kind of a pillar of our judicial system, that the Supreme Court only decides what they need to decide and defers everything else when they can. It's really kind of a historical precedent a lot for hundreds of years.
Which is also sort of how I saw the transgender case, which...
Okay, go right into that. That's one of my 6. I don't think that's one of the biggest cases, but it's worth a mention.
Yeah, that really what the Supreme Court was saying is we're not going to step in and decide this on a national level, that we're going to continue to let states deal with this at the state level.
And would this be fair, or do you think it's not immoral? It could be immoral. I guess some people think it would be an immoral statement. But as a conservative, that's where I think it should be. The states should be thinking through these difficult issues, because it is a difficult issue.
Maybe the biggest and most important difficult issue is you have to protect women's rights. And we need to seriously think about the implication for women's rights when we work.
But you're arguing for a national decision then.
Well, I'm just saying before we weigh in on this, and here's the other thing. The Constitution is just silent on some things.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some things that have to be decided by individuals and families, and you can't rely on the Supreme Court to fix every problem in your life.
Yeah. Like now you're making the conservative argument again.
But there are some things that are outside of the political system. I would be happy. But in addition, there is the federalism. Let's throw this at federalism. Let's see how people live. Let's see how people move. Let's see what actually happens. And maybe we never need to weigh in on this, or maybe we do at some point. But remember, jumping in and saying we're going to follow cutting edge science the minute it's announced by a scientist somewhere is how we got a lot of the racist laws of the 19th century. So sometimes it's better to wait, because settled science isn't quite settled science yet.
So that was my opinion as well. It's okay to keep it with the states and the experiment of states trying to figure this stuff out. Bart or Jeff, anything to jump in on that, or are we good on that case?
Just a quick note. If you read Justice Comey Barrett's book, she talks about what things should the Constitution protect, and those are the things that have to be federal, that we all have to have the same rule. And so it's not really a debate about whether girls or boys should be in the other sports. It's really a debate of, is that one of those rights that was, in her view, was original and so therefore needs to be protected by the Constitution, or is that one that came after? And she argued that abortion was in that camp. And then we're just using federalism to determine where we should stand. So is it a fundamental right that everybody should have?
I'm not sure you simplified it. I think you made it more complicated, but maybe that's why I'm not a lawyer.
It's not simple. You can't simplify it. It's not simple.
Okay.
It's just a matter of what process do we use to make a decision.
Fair enough. Bart, anything, or are we good to go on that case?
I think we're good to go. I agree with Jeff's additions and your guys' prior discussion on this one.
Cool. And Jeff, welcome to the conversation. You're welcome to jump in anytime you wish. Professor, I only have 3 other cases from this term that I want to make sure we're addressing, but you may have some that I missed. Do you care whether we talk about campaign finance, Watson v. RNC, immigration, or mail-in ballots?
Any of those are fine with me. I'm good. Yeah. Whatever.
Which one?
Dealer's choice. No, dealer's choice. You
okay. Go. Campaign finance. And I'm not talking about political per se, because we all have an opinion on whether money and whether we like all these flyers and TV ads and campaign consultants and blah blah blah. But historically and Supreme Court wise, does it make sense to give the money back to the, well, not money back, but can now political parties can raise unlimited amount of money and consult with candidates? Are we good? Is that a positive change back to society historically?
Yes. Yes.
Context.
Uh, that that the freest speech in America should be political speech, and
Well,
that
Supreme Court has ruled that the highest protected form of speech is political speech in America. I mean, that's the highest protected speech. So good.
and sometimes Congress has rights too. Congress weighs in and tries to take away political free speech in the form of campaign finance reform. And as more pieces of that, that bad legislation come up, it is my hope that they continue to um, remove all of the parts of it that limit free political speech.
And you don't, well, okay, I think that's limiting enough. You do agree that disclosure, public requirements of disclosure is a legitimate public policy and doesn't limit speech.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that there's no position against disclosure, but because there was a debate originally, and the people who argued that it was a bad idea, weren't morons, but they said, I'd say that's a political question, not a constitutional question. So I think Congress can weigh in on disclosure.
And
But
on that point, though, in our founding of our country, though, we did have anonymous
yeah,
treaties, right?
and I do think it's sometimes, I mean, but this is why I say it's not a slam dunk case, is that some laws were designed to prevent um, uh, like terrorists from having access to information about who engaged in political activity.
Or
So
foreign interests. I mean,
yeah, it could be,
we
but
don't want foreign
we weren't.
countries.
Yeah, that's probably something to consider now, but I don't know how much of it was part of the original debates around disclosure.
Hmm,
I think it,
interesting. I would have guessed it was significant. Foreign, I thought like France, we want to make sure France or Spain isn't influencing our political process. I thought that was historic.
oh yeah, there's some of that too. I'm sorry, I was thinking more of the late 19th century, but
Okay.
yeah, there's a little bit of that in the.
Okay. So this is a no-brainer. Why were the three dissenters then? Do they also have legitimate points that we should consider, or no, they're political?
I mean, I think that the dissenters were politically motivated, that essentially they have adopted the idea that money in politics is bad and that it would be good if the government limited money in politics.
Isn't
And
that probably the dominant position in the United States? If we were to look at a poll, wouldn't it be like 60 or 70% of people think that there's too much money in politics?
yeah, I mean, but that's also an easy enough thing to say. It's a much harder thing. I mean, it's kind of like hearkening back to abortion debates. It was really easy to say, to slap a label on yourself, oh, I'm pro-life or I'm pro-choice. It's really hard to say what you're actually for. Okay, now who gets to actually regulate the hospitals? And campaign finance reform is kind of the same way, where you say, oh, we should limit money in politics. It's like, do you really think that that you're okay? Does that mean you get to shut down the New York Times? You're like, oh no, we have a First Amendment. Right. Well, the New York Times is a for-profit corporation that spreads information. And the Supreme Court has said, we're not going to make a distinction and say that, a media company that is new um, is not as legitimate as the New York Times.
Which goes right back to Citizens United, a group of people want to
Exactly.
produce a movie.
And so the practical reality is the only political speech that you can limit is the parties. And so on a very practical,
I take issue here. I think we are living in our own cocoon in this belief. You go up a few hundred miles north to Canada, they have limits on how long the campaigns run, and they have campaign finance limits. So we kind of get very comfortable in ours is better than theirs kind of thing. I see this as really taking money out of, you name the industry, the media, and recklessly putting it into and influencing a voting system.
So Professor Jeff is articulating the predominant argument of a majority of citizens, particularly in the liberal or democratic leanings, but it's a pretty common belief. And your response is, yeah, but Canada doesn't have the Constitution we have.
I mean, he says that this spending is reckless. Who decides?
A point. Quis custodes, who mount guard over the guardians. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't. The United States has more protections for free speech than other countries do, and we assume that freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, is connected to your property rights. I mean,
and human flourishing, by the way, able to express.
Yeah, but that it's just a fundamental human right that you don't lose your rights when you join with other people or when you acquire property.
When you freedom to associate, yeah. So the 6-3 decision, Watson v. RNC. I thank Jeff for your add-in. Jeff and Bart, do you want to add any thoughts on this?
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm going to stay off video because I'm in bad coverage. I'm also of the opinion that allowing unlimited money in politics allows the rich to have the loudest voice, and that subjects us to abuses. I've thought a lot about this. The First Amendment, protecting the First Amendment, is more important than literally anything else. And so I'll say the most naive thing I've said in a long time. If we can't limit it based on the First Amendment, if we can't limit the amount of money spent, we have to find a way to convince Americans to stop paying attention. We have to diminish the value of the dollar spent on a political message. And I'm not convinced that we can't do that. I just don't know how we do that yet.
Well, I'm not sure if you've only say a naive thing once in a while. If that's your most naive thing, I'm in trouble every day. Thanks for your thoughts, Jeff. Bart?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this because here in Colorado, I'm Jeff Pluth. I don't know where you actually are, but here in Colorado, we just had some very interesting elections where candidates getting outspent actually won. So I think to Jeff Dugdale's point, here in Colorado, a lot of voters did not pay attention to the spending, to the messages that were resulting from huge disparities in spending. What I'm
Bart,
finding.
You're talking about Bennett v. Weiser. You're talking about, Marx may have won over Kirkmeyer with a huge outspending. And you're also talking about Attorney General's race. So at least 3 races where she had more money.
Well, and also the first congressional district here, the DeGette race. The winner of that race was outspent, although she did have a lot of help coming from outside, but it was nowhere near what the incumbent was spending.
Yeah.
Or having spent on her behalf. And that's my other point here, is that a lot of the spending going on right now is not, like John, when you and I ran for office, we actually had to raise money. like third parties who liked us basically gave us their money to spend. Now, what's going on is candidates are benefiting hugely from third party groups that just say, well, we're going to spend a boatload of money on you and, don't pay attention to us. And I mean, in one race, a very local race here, I got a mailer literally every day for the 2 weeks before the election from the losing candidate. But it really wasn't from the losing candidate. It was from a third party group that was supporting her. And I thought to myself, my God, number one, that's really a waste of money. Number two, how stupid. What are we doing? This candidate really isn't campaigning. She's being supported by these people who aren't even from Colorado. And, what are we doing here?
So you like this decision? So Bart, you like this decision, Watson v. RNC. It makes sense to allow the political parties to coordinate with campaigns and candidates.
I'm at a point where, I think that's okay. Because the political parties are so neutered now that the political parties are not serving as a filter for candidates. I think that's why we're getting a lot of crazy candidates running and basically, in essence, taking over political parties, is because the parties can't do anything about it. They don't have the resources.
Lots of truth to your points. Back to you, Professor. Any other comments on campaign finance, Watson v. RNC?
Yeah, I mean, let's remember something Frederick Douglass once said, which is all these things just have to take their chances against free speech and national enlightenment. And something we've said on this podcast a million times, Bart said it, Jeff said it, we all said it over the years, but the government can create the preconditions for a good society and a good culture, but it can't actually create that good culture. The New York Times, they get to have a newspaper. The Catholic Church, they get to build churches. And you can't have the only people whose free speech is limited be the political parties. It's an absurdity. It means that the only we keep putting regulations on the political parties because we can, and the political parties are for it because they benefit from it. Because it means that the high price of regulation means that people don't get to compete with the political parties. So I also just disagree with this notion somehow that that when you regulate the political parties, you're hurting them. That's not true. You're keeping them in business because you're making it harder for anybody to compete with them. Yeah, and then I agree with everything Bart said that on just a practical political level, it's small dollar donors who sway these elections in unpredictable ways, and the parties are completely unable to prevent radical candidates from claiming to be members of that party and then winning their nomination. And then taking over congressional seats in state assemblies and senates.
Cool. Got it. We only have a few minutes left, and we still have two major cases to talk about. Actually, maybe three, but I'm going to loop immigration. I think there was two, but immigration, and particularly changing the temporary status of, I forget it off the top of my head, of Haitians and one other country, but I think it applies to a lot of countries. The president, the Supreme Court has ruled that the president has that power in a 5-4 decision to deport a bunch of people across in really deplorable situations around the country or world. I mean, and yeah, if the president wants to do it, he has the power. Good thing or bad thing, Professor, historically?
I would say it's a thing. We have always had really strict, I shouldn't say always, but since the 20th century and 21st century, we've had pretty strict immigration policies with broad powers given to the executive. And one of the things that messed us up essentially was that presidents decided to not enforce those laws, and then the scope of the problem became so large that there's no way that a president could um, legally and humanely follow the law. Um, and so, in some sense, I think that the decision is probably not going to change very much. But I'm willing to let Bart.
Well, Professor, not to stick you, so to speak, but for about 1 million immigrants that were granted a temporary protective status, TPS, from Biden, those 1 million people are probably going to be deported back to their country. So it's a huge ramification to those folks. Now, so what do you mean it's probably not going to have a?
Well, I could be mistaken. Somebody could look this up quickly, but I thought that the decision wasn't retroactive.
Oh gosh, Bart,
I could
help
be
us out.
mistaken. Bart, am I wrong about that? Or can we look that up? So somebody look that up quickly.
Yeah, let me get on Google and kind of figure that
Yeah.
one out. I'm
All right.
not sure, yeah.
No, it has to be retroactive. President Trump wants to deport them. He wants to stop the temporary status, and that means they're now deportable. I mean, by definition. So I think you're wrong on that, Professor. Not to stick you. Gosh, I don't know why I'm being a jerk today. So let's let Bart look that up and get back to us. Was there any other immigration case that we need to be talking about, Professor, or is that the one? Are we on the same page?
I think so, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll move on to another topic while we look up the answer.
Excellent. Mail-in ballots, 5-4 decision that ballots can be
That one
counted.
kind of surprised me. That
Why's
actually
that?
one of the more surprising decisions because I never really considered what ended up being the majority position. But once they kind of explained it, I thought, oh, all right, I guess I can kind of see that. First of all, that states have broad discretion in how they conduct their elections. Fine, we get that part. And then, but the question that it sort of hinged on is like, what is election day? And are you said to have voted when you made your mark on the piece of paper, or is voting when it is received? And I guess, I felt like you could have a good debate over this, but I could see the position that it's fine to leave it up to the states to say to us, you have voted when you make your mark and you get it to the post office and it is postmarked. So I don't
By the
know.
way, I concur with that, Professor. Colorado has it where you have to have it received by the clerk's office by 7 p.m. On election day, and if it's not received by them at 7:01, if it's not in the collection box or a county office at 7 o'clock, it ain't
Yeah.
counted. And I happen to
I mean,
like that.
I feel like the California position is far more radical or egregious than that position because in California we let you vote, but if there's some problem with your vote, then it's reconciled after the election takes place.
No, that doesn't bother me. We have that in Colorado too. Why would you
Yeah.
like if?
What's that?
Let me give you a specific. I've been to 4 election bureaus in the last 2 months. And if Meredith and I were to put our envelopes in the ballot in the wrong envelopes, they can cure that after the election. We have a signature on both, has to be a signature on both, but we put a ballot in the wrong envelope. They can look at both our ballots, see that we're married, see that we live together, and go, okay, let's count those 2 ballots. I want that curing after the fact. You don't?
I can see why you would just have one standard for what a vote is, and then whatever it is, you just apply it.
Well, but okay. How about sorry to be an expert on this. I've gotten older. My signature's fine, I think, but I have gotten older. But I think it's the same as it used to be. But a lot of people, when they get older, get shakier, and they discount that ballot. But they give you 7 days to cure it. They go, hey, by the way, we don't recognize this signature anymore. And you go, oh, I'm getting older. I'll come in and show you that I'm me.
I'm just saying, like, that seems fine. But if another state says, no, it's just in-person voting, and it has to be a government issued ID that we give you automatically,
Yeah.
and you have to be registered 3 weeks, or maybe it's 4 weeks, or maybe it's
Right.
6 weeks. I'm just
Yeah.
saying there are a lot of different, like none of these things individually are hills to die on for me. Like none of them are, the new face of Jim Crow. They're all just different ways of voting that came out of a political process. They all seem, uh, I don't have a great.
Okay. Well, we're saying I think the same thing then, because I don't care if what Mississippi does or Texas does. I mean, I guess I
Well, I care
don't
a
want
little
them to
bit.
be
I want to
too
make sure that nobody's being discriminated against, and I want to
Yeah.
make sure that whatever the system is, that it's fair, that it's equitable. That. But in terms of like, if somebody says no, we're just going to have in-person voting day of photo ID, and
That's what a state wants to do.
yeah, and the only exception is military serving overseas, not even military stateside. Like what, uh, all right, I guess that's what it is,
I
What's
want
the
the
impact
experiment of
if you
states.
make it a holiday?
Yeah. Make it make it a state holiday, make it a national holiday. These are all things that are, I think, within the big, great wash of conversations we can have that don't rise to um, one of them being unconstitutional and the other one being constitutional.
Well, I guess I want to differ with both Jeff and the professor on this. I don't want a federal national holiday, because as soon as we have a national federal holiday, then whatever president in the future is going to say, well, yeah, but it's got to be in-person voting nationwide. I don't want mail ballots. Well, no, I'm sorry. I want like my mail ballot in Colorado. Thank you very much. I don't want a one size fits all national policy. I want it to be left with the states. That's what the Constitution says: time, place, and manner. And I want the Congress to have a very limited role. I want the president to have no role. That's my hill to die on.
All right, die on it.
Okay. Anything? Yeah. Thanks for laughing at me, Bart. Anything to add to this? And then we need to go back to immigration.
Okay. And yeah, I kind of have an answer on the immigration thing, but
Okay.
on this one here, I basically agree with what Stephen and you, John, are saying here. I think the states, by and large, are doing just fine, being the main, being the main people running elections in this country. I don't think the federal government needs to really be involved in running elections.
Second, all in favor. Good. All right. Then we settled
Yeah.
that.
Counties really run elections. I mean, honestly,
Exactly.
counties.
Yeah. Mhm.
Counties.
Yeah, it's really a county thing. And, it'd be one thing if, like, we did have a massive voter fraud problem in this country, but we clearly do not. I know people want to say that we do, but the reality is we don't.
Yeah.
Most of your illegal aliens are not going to vote because, for God's sakes, they know they're illegal aliens, and they're not going to, go into it, a government thing and try to vote. It's like, yeah, it does happen.
It
does happen. You're never going to
cracked
prevent
30% in Colorado, and we mailed a ballot to every single person in the state. We mailed them a ballot, and we barely cracked. We can't get U.S. citizens to vote.
Yeah.
I mean, so anyway,
it's amazing.
Back to we're out of time, gentlemen. So
one last thing on that, the voting though is, I'll forget it. Never mind.
All right, we're out of time.
I want my answer on immigration.
Agreed, but it's got to be quickly, Bart.
Back to TPS. Back to the temporary protected status case. From my searching here on the internet real fast, I think this ruling it has an effect that in reality is retroactive, because what they're saying is that the director of Homeland Security, the secretary of Homeland Security, does have the authority anytime he or she wants to revoke temporary protected status, and the courts are just not going to review that. And the effect of that is that if you are purely in the country because of a TPS designation, you are kind of at risk of being, apprehended and deported. Now it's really complicated because the immigration laws are so screwed up, to be honest, that you can have any number of statuses under that law at any given moment, because you can go in and get a, you can have a green card, you can have this, you can have that. So you may have been admitted to the country under TPS, but you may not be under TPS anymore. You may have some
Bart,
other kind of humanitarian parole or something.
So you're saying, Bart,
go ahead, John.
when Biden allowed Haiti, because of the circumstances there, to give 300,000 Haitians the ability to temporarily stay in the United States until the situation has been resolved, somebody in Haiti who's here might also apply for asylum or something. There may be other ways to accomplish the same. Therefore, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated, but there are probably hundreds of thousands of people who are, at risk of being deported as a result of that decision. And I read something in the New York Times or somewhere earlier this week that I guess the administration has started to ramp up their immigration arrests again, or apprehensions. I don't know what you call them.
And in this instance, it's different than illegal immigrants because they are legally here. And it's not like we don't know who they are or where they live. We know who they are, where they live, where they work. And if it's revoked, we can just say, we're coming to get you in your house or work, and we're putting on you a plane. Sorry. So it is a huge deal for certain people in a policy way, legally and historically. Do we have any other comments before we shut down?
Well, the Congress wrote it into the law, and this part of it is not reviewable by the courts.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another clear example of we're not going to undo this because Congress specifically said in this law that this part of it is not reviewable by the courts. But as Bart says, that doesn't mean that every one of these people is still under only that status. So,
Professor, that does.
And also remember that Obama managed to deport a lot of people very quietly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just because one tool is foreclosed or loud, that doesn't mean that there aren't other tools that were never controversial. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say never controversial, but were much less controversial under the Obama administration.
So, Professor, you brought me to a point that I'd like to make a concluding statement, then you'll get the last word. I think too many of us, and probably me included, citizens view the Supreme Court as some super legislature or something. And when they make a decision that they're mad about, they're mad oh, those partisan people in the court are making the thing I disagree with. And I just have the opposite opinion that you got to go back to what the Constitution says. Then you got to go what the statute says. Then you got to go to what common law says. Then you got to go what the precedent says. The court has a very specific role in society, and it's not to be a legislature. It's to look and see what the law is. Now, if we don't like the law, then we got to take it out on the president or take it out on Congress who writes the laws, but don't take it out on the Supreme Court unless they're not reading the law. then you should take it out on the court. Do you have now a concluding statement? And by the way, that's in a minority opinion. I don't know who else agrees with that. Very few, it seems like. Jonah Goldberg and David French and you probably. There's four of us. Do you have a concluding comment on today's show?
I guess my concluding comment is that it's July 3rd and tomorrow is July 4th, and that we should be thinking about the ways in which the political system have done the successes of the political system that we have in so far is that it's kind of amazing. Here we are 250 years later being held together by, as Calvin Coolidge said, these ideals that are final. If all men are created equal, that is final. If governments derive their rights from the consent of the governed, that is final. And no progress can be made beyond these propositions. So if you think that there's something better out there, what you have is an old idea. That the new idea, the new order for the ages, the new idea is still the American Declaration of Independence. And the implementation of this new idea managed to break history. It is a breaking point. It is a dividing line in human history that has led to tens and hundreds of millions of people living better lives and longer lives and happier lives, not subject to arbitrary power. And that's something we should take a pause and at least take a moment and be thankful for. And these debates that we're having over individual Supreme Court cases and decisions, like, this is amazing. We should every now and then read the dissents, the concurrences, and the opinions, and just read all of it and be thankful that we have smart people who are trying really hard to do the right thing. And that we all get to benefit from it as long as we stay committed to those ideals.
Lovely. Appreciate your concluding comments, Professor. It's such wise on the eve of our 250th. Oh, gosh, I'm happy, and I know most people are not for whatever reason. I'm happy, and we have a lot of work to do. Jeff,
maybe you should separate people should separate their own happiness from the government.
From what the government's doing. I know. But they would argue they're caring for the oppressed or people that aren't able to be as happy. And I get that. It's a legitimate point. But yeah, I side with you. We should be happy and then work toward what we want to fix. So, Professor, excellent comments. Jeff, you're always welcome here. I don't think you've been in many shows, so thank you for adding in. Sorry to cut you short. We try to start right on time, and then you can catch the note. But hate me, not Professor. Please come back. Sandon, thanks for just being a great listener today. And Bart, thanks for your comments. And when we see Jeff, we'll thank him for his wise legal opinions.
Yeah, good contributions from Jeff and Bart today. And Jeff, thanks, and Sandon, thanks.
Yeah, boy, but I'm telling you, these are smart lawyers, Professor, and you just held your own on all of it.
Malpractice alert anytime I talk about the law, right? I have no business.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Okay. Goodbye.
Happy 4th, everybody.
Yeah.